mystery be? Think I'll just let the mystery be.
Hey guys, it's Kevin giving my review for the series finale of The Leftovers, Season 3, Episode 8, The Book of Nora, and holy shit, I mean, this is a finale that I was not at all prepared for. I'll tell you that going into it. As much as I have loved this season, as much as this season has prepared me emotionally, I was not prepared going into this episode. I really wasn't, because I just can't be. I love this show too much, and I think the show is too great for me to really just fully prepare for the idea that this show is ending. I still can't really fathom the idea that the show is actually over. But regardless of that, I was extremely hyped for this finale, obviously. This season has probably been the strongest the show has given us, and that's saying something, because you guys know I love the hell out of Season 2. Season 3 is improved in basically every way, in my opinion at least, and, I think that it's been very consistent, and I really have loved everything they've done with the characters. They've gotten in these crazy situations. They've gotten deeper with, you know, where these characters are going and things like that. So I didn't really know what this finale was going to entail, and I was happy that Damon Lindelof was being so secret about it, because you could really tell that this was going to be a really big finale. And I have to say that after watching this, while this was not at all the finale that I expected, this was a damn good finale, and it was absolutely the right finale for the show. There's not a doubt in my mind that tells me that this finale was wrong. Everything about this finale I absolutely love. They really wrapped up everything perfectly, and again, it wasn't in the way that I expected to go, but isn't that kind of like the formula of The Leftovers? They always kind of exceed, you know, they always kind of subdue your expectations, and they always kind of, you know, change what you think it's going to be. Well, that's very much what's going on here, and I thought this was a fantastic finale overall. But let's just get into the episode, which, as you guys saw in the beginning, the intro was actually what I expected to be. The intro is the only predictable thing about this episode, because we're actually taken back to the traditional music, which I thought was going to happen. I thought it would just kind of make sense. It would make the show come full circle. So we are, in fact, taken back to the Season 2 intro, and we then see Nora, who, I mean, there's a reason why this episode is called The Book of Nora, because most of this episode does focus on Nora, and she's making her video about her leaving to go through a device to be with her family, and she says that she indemnifies all individuals that's about to occur, and she makes it clear that she is acting on her own free will, that this wasn't someone who forced her to do this. You know, she's doing this because she wants to, and she says that's it. But Dr. Becker is really not pleased, and Nora asks if something's wrong. You know, she did everything right. Dr. Eden tells her it's fine, and Nora asks what she said, and Eden says that Becker wants her to do it again, and Nora asks why, and Becker says because she does not believe her. She feels like she's just saying what they want her to say. She's not really saying what she genuinely, you know, how she generally feels. She's just kind of saying scripted lines on paper, almost like how Kevin last week as the president, you know, when he was in that alternate world, said a lot of things on paper that he didn't believe. That's how false this really is. I mean, this just doesn't feel that sincere. And basically, Nora says that they invited her there and then rejected her, but she sat outside their house all night and followed them there, so they have no choice but to let her go into their machine, so she doesn't give a shit what they want to hear. You know, this has all been her. She's basically forced them to let her do this, and I'm glad that they very quickly explained that. Like, again, you know, we didn't need a ton of explanation there, because we knew that Nora was determined, and she did what she could to make sure that she went through this device, and that even though they declined, that she would not take no for an answer. So she assures them that she doesn't lie, and Dr. Eden asks her to say her children's names, and Nora then says their names, and Eden says she meant in her statement, and asks her if she'd like to try it again, and Nora agrees, and this time she goes on, and it's a lot more emotional. She says the same stuff, but talks about how today is the day she's leaving to be with her children. She says their names, and she's ready to go now, and this perfectly sets up for the emotional finale that we really are in for. So, see Nora and Matt, they walk to the facility, and Dr. Eden tells her they prefer to give a more thorough orientation, but since they were in the process of moving on, she'll just have to bear with them to see what looks like the corpse of a person inside of a metal plate. And obviously, Matt is taken aback by this. He's kind of, you know, you get the sense that he's obviously very worried this could turn out to be Nora, and Matt asks if it was, and Dr. Eden casually just passed it off as a fossil, and the person's actually gone. So you get the sense that Nora could be at risk here. Now, you know Nora's not going to die, because we saw her in the future flashback, you know, in the future flash forward, but you do know that this could this could very much harm Nora. And basically, Dr. Ian tells her as soon as they administered her saline drip, she will disrobe outside the truck, and once she's inside, she will see the event chamber on the far end, and she is to just walk to it, and she may experience nausea or discomfort as she passes by the undiluting laser ray. While it cycles up, she is to step outside the event chamber, close the exit port behind her, and turn the latch to left so it sticks. And I love the way the scene was done. The whole scene, she's kind of like monitoring on like this dummy version of Laura, which I thought, not Laura, I mean of Nora. I thought was really cool the way that was done. The way we saw her use this, figurine to kind of show what Nora's going, to show what Nora's really getting herself into. And basically, she's to pull her knees to her chest and hold them there. Nora agrees, and Dr. Ian says that they will be monitoring her from inside there, and once inside the event chamber, she'll be able to hear them, and they will be able to hear her. And once she's ready, they will start the admission sequence, and she will hear 3 tones, and after the third one, it will fill up with fluid. They will have the same consistency. It's water, though. It is not water. It contains metals that will be irradiated, and she says that once this occurs, the fluid will solidify, and she is not to ingest or breathe, and any of the fluid, as her lungs would also solidify upon transport. And she asks her if she can hold her breath for 30 seconds. Nora says yes, and I got the sense that Nora was less willing to adhere to this, and she just kind of she's just kind of agreeing to anything because she just wants to get this over with. She's waited long enough. There's really nothing she's going to say no to. Even if she's not okay with it, she's going to say no. She's going to say yes. And Dr. Ian tells her that it's then, and Nora has her robe on, and I thought, basically that's it. That's, they went over the procedure and everything, and then we get probably the most heartbreaking scene we've got between Nora and Matt. And guys, we are only 10 minutes into the episode at this point, and already the show found a way to genuinely make me cry. This scene was very emotional. We see her, she has a robe on, and Matt is concocting a story as to what her obituary would say, and they both laugh as to how ridiculous it sounds. And it turns out that Matt basically has this thing called Matt Lives. Basically, it goes all the way back to her when she was at this horrible Bible camp that their grandparents used to send her off to in the Arendex. And he says that it wasn't that. It was Camp Holy Spirit. She was apparently only 8 years old with pigtails, and she asks if he remembers what he said to her when he put her on the bus. And it was that she was the bravest girl on earth. And every time he sent her a letter with a new Mad Lib. So it is like a Mad Lib, but it's mainly just a way to comfort her, and in it, that's who it was addressed to, the bravest girl on earth. And this is obviously why Matt is so trusting of Nora, and why he hasn't tried to stop her here. And he says he forgets about it. She says that he drives her fucking nuts, but he's always been a great gecko. And she says that because he was the gecko in the Mad Lib, which this scene again was just so well done. He says if he'd be trying to talk her out of this. She says that he's great, but because he's not trying, and she assures him that she'll be fine, and he says of course she will be, she always is, but he's scared of what will happen when he goes back to Mary. He's very worried that when he goes back to Mary, things are going to get, things will not be the same, because Mary did leave him, and he's, there's that whole chance that maybe Mary is going to be back in that, comatose state. Maybe Mary isn't going to be as put together as she seems, and the chemicals are going to put in his body to try to make him better, and that it won't work, and, he's worried that he's scared of dying, and that his son will grow up without him and forget his face and the sound of his voice. But most of all, he's scared that he'll survive, because if he ever does, how can he stand in front of a room full of people and convince them that he has the answers when he in reality has no idea what the fuck he's really talking about? He's kind of just gone along with a lot of this biblical teachings, and in reality, he's nothing special. He's just a guy that has, had God influenced by him his entire life and used that as kind of the catalyst for every action he's done. And, in reality, he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. And I really did love seeing that of Matt. It really did make sense why he's taken the path that he really has here. And you can really see how terrified he really is. But he's also incredibly hopeful. She asks if he wants her to come with her instead. He says he thinks it defeats the purpose. And he knows that he needs to be the one to live. He needs to be out there. He needs to suffer, and that's exactly what he's willing to do. And she asks what he's going to tell people about her and what happened there, and he says he will say whatever she wants him to, and just a very powerful scene. I love the way this was done. You really do see that bond between these two siblings. That's something that I think this season has really elevated very well, has really seen more between these two. You really do see how much they care about each other, but also how much Matt really does inspire her, and how much he does see a lot of hope in her. Most of his hope is in Nora. Nora. He knows that she's able to get out of anything. She's the champion. She's the go-getter. And he very much feels like just the brother who doesn't really know what he's doing. He's kind of just gone along with a lot of this biblical stuff. And you really do see how lost Matt really is. But that really does show that he is as lost as all the characters on the show. And I really did love the way this was done. You can tell this does feel like the final scene. It is, in fact, the final scene we see of Matt. I'm not going to tell you why, but it is actually the final scene we physically see of Matt's. And it's incredibly well done. I love the way that was handled, and I don't really think it could have gotten the scene any better than they did. So, Dr. Ian and Becker go to her and ask if she's ready. Matt says, of course, because she is the bravest girl on Earth, and she stands alongside the men. She disrobes and prepares to go inside the device, and she gets inside. They close it up, completely naked at this point, and this scene was incredible because there's so much going through her head at this point, because she thinks back to the last time that she saw her kids, which, if you guys remember, wasn't really a joyous time. They spilled apple juice on her phone. Doug and her were kind of going through rough times because she knew Doug had an affair, and basically, you know, she's kind of remembering what her kids did for her, and I think she's kind of thinking of all the pros and cons, and she realizes that, you know what, I've gone this far, why stop now? She opens up the chamber, she steps inside, closes it tight, the chamber hisses, and Dr. Ian asks her if she can hear. Nora says yes, and Dr. Ian says her brother is with them, and Matt then greets her, says he loves her, she says she loves him too. Dr. Ian says they're going to begin, and the machine then starts knocking, and she breathes heavily. And again, so much tension riding on this scene. We had no idea really what was going to happen here. Even though we knew Nora was alive in the future, we have no idea if that was because of old age, or if it was that the chemicals did something to her. We really had no idea what was going to happen here, and I was really worried, honestly. I didn't know what the show was about to show us, and I was kind of scared as to where, you know, what was really going to happen here. I was kind of scared about that. So basically, we see that the gas is starting to pour down. She holds her breath. She's quickly covered in it, and then she gasps as it piles up around her, and then we abruptly cut. So we don't know what happened to Nora, and at first, I thought we were going to go back to Australia. That's where we're going to go. We were going to see Kevin, and we do, in fact, do that, but we actually have this incredible twist where we cut abruptly to a scene that looks very familiar to what we saw in the first episode, and Nora is, you know, she's now going by Sarah. She's with the pigeons who predict what the end of the world is coming. She puts well, at least we think that's what's going on. She puts all the pigeons in cages, and she ties a chain around her bike. She rides out to a church and meets with the same nun who tells her she was worried she forgot, and she says she usually doesn't get so many close together, believes love is in the air. She gives her some money, says she'll pay her even extra for her trouble, and the nun asks her if the name Kevin means anything to her. Sarah says no, but instead of the first episode, we actually do go on from here, and this scene in general is so confusing. You don't know what's happening here, but that's kind of, again, that's something that we expect from this show. We expect it to be very confusing. We expect it to give us a lot of unanswered questions, and this half of the episode, most of the episode actually takes place in this part of the world, which was very risky for them to do, but I think it really does help the show overall. It really does show with the story that they were trying to tell, and I thought it actually really did work here. So basically, the nun asks if she's sure because a man calling himself that came by yesterday, and he had a photo of her, and Sarah asks if she told him anything, and the nun says of course not, but she thinks he knew that she was lying. And basically, now we know what's going on, that Kevin was clearly trying to contact her, and we knew that was going to happen eventually. I thought that he would try to stop her in the device, but it seems like he is trying to contact her. So she rides out, and she's obviously thinking about Kevin. You know, how can she not? I mean, they did have these memories together. Even though she'd rather not forget about him, after all the time they've had together, there's no way she can just get him off his mind. It's just not that possible. There's no way that's really going to happen. I think Nora knows deep down that she'll always have this love and passion for Kevin, and that's something that she really is forced to, you know, come to terms with in this episode. It's something that she clearly was trying to abandon and move on with her life, but she's forced to bring that part of her life back into, you know, a lot of that, you know, tension with Kevin does resurface here, and they definitely do have a lot of bad blood between each other, and that's something that is extremely well explored within this finale. So she goes inside and goes about her usual routine. She makes a sandwich for herself alone. She throws some clothes on the bed, puts some food inside of a jar, and she puts on her coat, and we can tell she's basically at this point living in complete seclusion. There's no one that seems to be there. No one seems to have any idea of where she really is, and we then hear a knock at the door, and it turns out that it actually is a much older Kevin. He has significantly aged, and this does confirm we are, in fact, in the future. Where the rest of this episode takes takes place. And again, a very risky choice, but because of what the story really was in this episode, it actually really did make a lot of sense. And we see he's also now clean shaven. He's no longer has the beard, which I kind of saw as he's no longer with Nora. Nora's the one who told him to grow the beard in the first place. So now that he's not with her, he doesn't have much of a reason to have the beard. That's kind of what I saw it as, that the beard was kind of his, him kind of adhering to Nora. Despite the fact if he really wanted it or not, he grew the beard for her, just like she did many things for him, and just like he would go places just because she simply wanted to. He did this throughout his entire life, and that's something that he really, I think, realized was the fatal error of what he's done. And I think the first part of doing that was shaving off the beard, because I think he genuinely didn't want it. I think Nora, she told him to put it on, and him taking off the beard was kind of the first step in him kind of reevaluating his life and his purpose beyond Nora. So he says he doesn't know if she remembers him, but he was the chief of police in Mapleton, and they only really talked a couple of times. So immediately you're like, what the hell's going on here? I mean, Kevin doesn't seem to have any memory of them in Jarden or of them in Australia, and all he talks about is this Christmas dance that was at the high school, which we didn't even see a scene of, which I thought was actually interesting that it was a scene we didn't see, but they had a really nice conversation in the hallway, and he doesn't expect her to remember since it was a long time ago, and she asks what he's doing here, and he says he's been kind of wandering around Australia on vacation, just kind of getting off the grid and avoid the touristy stuff, and he likes to get a little lost. And he says he was in that little town up the road and he saw her riding her bike and recognized her, and so he found out where she lived, and here she is. And she says that that's not what happened, because, the nun told her what actually happened. She says he showed a picture of her to the nun at the convent and found out where she lived, and he laughs and asks why he have a picture of her, and she says she just came from there. She told her about it, and he asked if she's married or seeing somebody, since he noticed she wasn't wearing a wedding ring. And he says he saw that they were having a dance in town tonight, and when he saw her riding her bike, it reminded him of how he always had wished that he had asked her to dance, and he knows it sounds crazy, but he felt a connection. So here they are in the middle of nowhere, bumping into each other, and he's only here for the night, and he figures if he didn't ask her to dance tonight, he'll never forgive himself. And she says that he needs to leave now, and he agrees, says he gets it, that a guy she barely remembers shows up at her doorstep asking her to go on a date with him, but he had to try, and she tells him to go. And it's not because she doesn't want Kevin there, because no, she doesn't want Kevin back in her life, but also because Kevin is completely disregarding all of the memories that they had together, and she has no idea why this is going on. I mean, imagine if you were in this very committed relationship for many years, and you had this life with this person, and they just completely forgot about all of it. I mean, that's essentially what's happening to Nora here. Most of the major events in her life that has kind of led her to Australia in the first place, now, though, that whole reasoning behind all that, he's kind of erased. It doesn't really seem like Kevin really is remembering any of it. We don't really know what's going on here. And again, the show does a very good job of making you think, oh, this could be an alternate world, or oh, this could be an alternate Kevin. But we'll get more into that in a little bit later. But basically, she slams the door and sighs, and she lights a cigarette, and she's doing all she can to try to move on from the encounter. She wants to make sure that she doesn't talk to him, but the next day she rides on her bike, she goes to a payphone and calls someone, and in a shocking twist, it's Laurie. Yes, Laurie is actually alive. She's not just alive, she's alive and well, and she also has a baby son. So Laurie actually did not kill herself in the 6th episode, which I found it was for a couple reasons. One, because I think genuinely that call that Jill and Tommy gave her, I think really did give her a lot more faith, and I think it made her realize her purpose in life, and that she can't just go. But Damon Lindelof also said the creators of the show were in such somberness over Laurie's death that they almost stopped writing the show altogether and almost delayed the show completely, so we decided to keep Laurie on. And honestly, I think it was the right choice to do. Amy Brenneman is billed as the second main character of the show, even though we all know Nora is the second main character. Season 1, it was Kevin and Laurie. That was a big part of the show. Laurie in general, she's billed as second main character, and I think it was definitely the right choice to keep her around here. So basically, Nora asked her if she told Kevin where she was, and Laurie is shocked that he's in Australia. I mean, she had no idea about it, and she insisted she didn't, and that they established clear boundaries the first time she called her, that she doesn't tell the people where she's living, and she doesn't tell her about the people there. So, Nora doesn't know anything about that. She says that she would never betray it, and Nora asks how he found her then, and Laurie asks how he said that he did, and Nora says that said that he was here on vacation, and he spotted her, and then he came to her house and knocked on her door, and acted like they were just casual acquaintances from Mapleton, which obviously is not true. He's acting like none of it really happened. And Laurie says she's surprised since this is very unlike Kevin, and Nora asks if he's crazy, and Laurie asks if he seems that way, and Nora says no, he seemed happy, and Laurie continues to just say, huh, and Nora tells her to stop fucking saying that, and she asks why he's doing this, and Laurie says that she really doesn't know. I mean, why would he be doing this? It just seems so out of character. Why is he all of a sudden just ignoring everything? And asks her if he said anything else. Nora says he asked her to a dance in town, and Laurie asks if she doesn't want to, and Nora says no, that she wants nothing to do with the dance, and Laurie asks what she does want, and Nora says she wants him to leave her alone, and Laurie asks why she's calling her then, since she can't really do anything about it being half a world away. Why'd she call her? Nora says she called her because she thought she told him where she was, and Laurie says she called her because she wanted to ask her if it was okay for her to go to the dance, and Nora says she doesn't want to go to the fucking dance. Laurie says if she did, it's okay, and she hangs up the phone in anger, and Laurie says same time next week. So we realize a couple things here. Not only has Laurie and Nora been having regular sessions, and they have been having this relationship as patients and therapists. They definitely have had that sort of relationship, but we now know that Laurie is in fact alive. I think it was definitely the right move for the show. I think it was really cool to see Laurie one last time, and it really made a lot of sense why she wouldn't kill herself. I think she just kind of realized her purpose here. Nora really does need her in her life. A lot of other people really do need her, and I think she realized the loss that people would have would be too insurmountable for the show to continue. Just like the creators had such an insurmountable loss over Laurie, I think it made a lot more sense to keep her around. So I overall was very happy that they did in fact keep her around here, and it was really cool to see her one last time. So Nora then rides out, and she basically continues to do the exact same thing the next afternoon, making sure that all her doors and windows are locked. That way Kevin can obviously not come in. She then starts a bath and makes sure to attempt to close her broken down door, which the door is like really badly broken down. Like it's barely even in the hinge, and she gets into the bath and she puts a washcloth over her face. She soaks in the tub, and I saw that kind of her way is just kind of like to get away from it all and just kind of condense and relax. And she brushes her teeth and she tries to reopen the door, but the knob is stuck, and she literally has to run into it until it collapses down on her. And again, just a little scene like that just shows how great Carrie Coon really is. Just seeing how hard of work she had to do that, I thought was really well done. But she then gets dressed and kind of realizes that what she needs to do. Even though she did decline to the dance, she is still very much intrigued. I mean, Kevin will always be a major part of her life. Kevin is someone who she did have a very deep relationship with, who I think she still really does care about, and because of his persuasion, I think she genuinely does kind of not feel bad for him, but I think she definitely does feel like it is kind of her duty to go about this. So basically, we see her, she goes to the dance, she goes to where the dance is being held, and she walks around, and immediately she starts to realize that this isn't really the dance that Kevin described. This man comes up to her and asks where her beads are, and he gives her his necklace, and she actually declines. She continues to walk around and searches for Kevin, and she finds him sitting at a table talking to another woman, and at first I thought, oh, this must be like another love interest, or this is the girl he took instead, but basically she walks over, he sees her, and is surprised she came, and she said that it's a wedding, because it is. This is totally a wedding. This is not a dance at all, and he says he knows, and she asks if he was told he was even invited, and he says that he was, and he points at a man named Eddie who can take a tractor apart and put it back together blindfolded, allegedly, and then points out Aggie, who is actually the woman that he was talking to. Now, she was in the army, but left, and he bumped into her at the hotel bar and told him that if he didn't come, then they'd be angry with him. So she asks how he found her, and he says that he's on vacation in Australia. Again, giving her that same bullshit statement that he's been giving throughout this episode, that, oh, I'm on vacation in Australia. And again, that's obviously not true. He's clearly, trying to avoid a lot of the more, darker sides of his life. So basically, she asks how he found her, and he says he saw her ride by on her bike, and she says, this is the middle of nowhere. Why would he come by for a vacation? Just out of all places, why Australia? I mean, it's very cold. It's not exactly very well, a good resort or anything like that. Why would he come here? And he says his father came down under a while back and told him that it was an amazing place, so he just kind of wanted to see it for himself, see what it was all about. And she asks if he's never been here, and this is the first time he's in Australia, and he says yes. So you can tell at this point point, she's really trying to see how much she can really push his buttons and really do see how much he can get engrossed into this, fabricated story. But she asks how long he's going to keep this up, but he again continues the charade. He just goes about it. She asks if they really only talked one time at that Christmas dance in Mapleton, and he says yes, and she asks about the courthouse where they got their divorces on the same day and ran into each other, and she asks him to go to Miami, but again, he seems to have no recollection of any of these events, and he says that they were strangers, she says, and he says she's giving him a hard time inviting her to a dance, and she says that it's a wedding again, and you can tell she's getting very aggravated at this point. I mean, he asked her to go to this dance, but yet he doesn't want to reflect on any of the memories they've shared together. And you can tell, I mean, Kevin's not crazy. He is purposely leaving out very big events, and she is very much starting to get very pissed off by it. And I really did love the way this was done, the way he clearly is trying to abandon and move on from everything that happened, when in fact that he's just kind of making it worse. Again, this is the same problem Nora and Kevin have had throughout the entire show, where they're not talking things out. And rather than talking things out, Kevin is simply avoiding them, pretending they never happened, and in general is making them a lot worse than they already were. So he again says that he must have her confused with someone else, because if she would have asked him to go to Miami with her, he definitely would have gone since he loves it. And she asks if he never left, and he says he's been a cop in Mapleton this entire time. So again, in his version of events, he never left Mapleton. This is sort of like what would happen if Kevin remained in Mapleton. And he says yes, and she says that he knew her brother Matt, and he says he was hoping she was going to come to the funeral, and she says that they said their goodbyes in person, and he says it was a beautiful service, and over 400 people came, and Mary actually gave the eulogy. So yeah, Mary and Matt actually did rekindle, and I was really happy to see that Mary, we find out, did in fact reconcile with Matt, and that she was alive and well. And I think we expected Matt to die, honestly. Like, when he said Matt died, I definitely did expect it. Still very sad, especially the fact that Nora wasn't in attendance there, but I think we knew that Matt's death was slowly approaching. It just kind of seemed like it was inevitable, but then we get an update on Jill and Tommy, who, like I've said before, are the only characters besides Erica who this season have really been able to let the mystery be. And we see that really has fared well for them. We see, he's surprised that she remembers his kids' names, and he says that Jill's great and married this great guy, and they have a daughter named Penelope, who's just a year old. Tommy's marriage, however, didn't really work out so great. He landed on his feet like he always does, and she asked about him, and yeah, so it seems that Jill and Tommy are doing fairly well, and she asks about him and if he's married again. He says no. She asks why not, and he says it's because he's still holding a candle for her, and she scoffs and says that she finds it hard to believe, and he says that his mom died when he was 9, and his dad never remarried since, and he tells her that his people hold candles, and she asks how his dad is, and he says he's fantastic, he's 91 and still kicking. I was expecting Kevin Sr. to be dead, but no, he is actually still alive and well, and she says that he must be immortal, and she says it runs in the family. He says he's not, and she asks who says, and he says his cardiologist, and we find out that Kevin actually had a condition that was undiagnosed his whole life, and a couple years back he had a heart attack, a pretty bad one, but they hadn't diagnosed the condition. He didn't know that he had it, so they just cut him open and placed a pacemaker. Now, I kind of saw this as, remember how Kevin, every time he would die, he would seemingly come back. I think in general that was having a much more internal impact on him than he really did think. Externally, he seemed completely fine, but I think internally, like inside of his heart, there were a lot more damage to him than we really thought there was, and I think this definitely does confirm that Kevin is definitely not immortal. He just doesn't rot like we do. Like, he doesn't die like the way we do. He doesn't suffer as much, and I think there was definitely a very well done twist. It does show that Kevin is vulnerable. He can't, he can in fact have some sort of flaw to him, but again, he did pass like this, this heart attack basically. So again, you do get the sense that he can't really die, and I definitely did like the way that was done. So Aggie then goes to him and sits on his lap, is surprised to see that Nora actually came, and she introduces Nora to her, who congratulates her, and Aggie says he didn't think she was coming, and she says it was nice for her to get all dressed up for the wedding, and she says she didn't know it was a wedding, and Aggie says she's just fucking with her and tells Kevin that she's very serious, and he says he wouldn't have it any other way, and Aggie asks him if he wrote his messages, and he says that he gave his to the nun, and he spots the nun, and basically she asks Nora if she wants to send a message of love to the world, and Nora says no, she's not interested in that at all. But Aggie sees that she's also a romantic, and she says she wants to get this over with, and she leaves. And Nora asks what he told her about them, and he says that he told her he had a crush on a girl, and he wanted to chase after her, but he didn't know what to say. So again, he's going with that idea that they don't know each other, that this is the first time they've seen each other in forever, and that they really do have no actual, legit conversations there. So, again, he's kind of sticking with that narrative, and it's sad, but again, it really does propel and make this a lot more compelling than it already could have been. I think already this was extremely compelling by putting in the future, but having Kevin blank out about events makes us really question what's going on, but also makes us very intrigued to see where this is really going. So Aggie then gives a speech that kind of, I think, sums up this entire show overall, where she talks about how she thanks everyone for coming. She says she's happy to be in love with him, tells him that she thinks she may be pregnant, but she's pretty sure it's his. She then tells the crowd that they have taken their notes and attached them to Nora's birds, we find out. Now, at this point, I was led to believe that Nora's birds were like the apocalypse birds in the 1800s, where they predict, when the end of the world is coming. Turns out they're actually lovebirds, who are, they attach love notes to them, and the birds kind of send them back, and now they're going to set them free so they can fly off to every corner of the world, spreading their love to people everywhere. And Nora watches as his sister releases the birds. Nora asks him what he wrote, and he says for him to know and some lonely Eskimo to find out. So Eddie then gives a speech that, like I said, I think really does sum up a lot of this show. He says he wishes life was only about love, but it's about temptation and failure and weakness and sin, and I think that's very true. I mean, a lot of the show has been about that, especially the temptation. This season especially has been about Nora and Kevin giving into those temptations that they've tried to pull back from, but this season they really did give into them. Nora with the device, Kevin with the whole, thing with him, with Kevin Sr. and everything, or with Evie as well. Those were definitely temptations, whether it be, sort of like what Kevin Sr. was doing, his temptation there. A lot of temptation got the best of him. I think that definitely is a big, the big theme of this season is the whole, and the show in general is all kind of the theme of temptation. But basically, he talked about there's a very big difference between a sin and a mistake, because a mistake, you just kind of mess up, but a sin is when you know something is wrong and you do it anyway, and they look at each other knowing that they have committed sins, and I really love the way they just look at each other, knowing that they have committed many sins among each other. And he even tells Aggie that he looks forward to the lifetime of fucking up with her, but he hereby swears he will never sin again, and he tells him to bring out the goat, and he says, in biblical times, a goat was designated to be driven into the desert with the sins of the community upon it, and he takes off his beads, and I thought this was going to be like Jardim, where they, decapitate the goat, but we see that's not what the goat's for now. He puts it around the goat, tells them to all do the same, that Russell will drive the scapegoat into the woods far from here until they can start over untainted by their past mistakes. Sort of what Kevin's kind of doing now. Like, he's trying to start over and pretend that stuff never happened and just kind of push it aside. And that's kind of what I saw this as a metaphor as. But we see Kevin is happy they didn't sacrifice it. Nora asks if he's ever seen that. He says it would be weird. He puts his beads around the goat. He asks her to dance with him. She takes his hand, and they start dancing. And she asks how he found her. And he again says the same thing, that he's on vacation. He saw her riding on her bike. And she says she simply cannot do this, and he asks why not, and she says it's simply because it's not true. There's not enough truth to what he's saying for her to really feel like she should put any effort into this whatsoever. If he's gonna pretend like they have no history together, then there's no point in her to really go about this relationship. It's completely pointless, and it was a very sad scene, but again, very inevitable, and you can tell that Kevin definitely is not going to go about this, the way he is. So she leaves, rides on her bike, returns home, and then she climbs up a ladder, and she stands on a roof and looks at something in the distance with binoculars. She rides out and sees a man on a motorcycle coming down that looks a little bit like Kevin Sr., and she knocks on the door, and the nun answers, and she asks the nun what she did with her birds. The nun says she let them go, just like she always does, and she asks what's wrong, and Nora says that what's wrong is that they didn't come back like they always do. I guess these birds kind of always come back, but they didn't come back this time, and, she feels like the woman clearly didn't do something right. She didn't feed right before she let them go. The woman and the nun says she did everything the same, and Nora asks where they are then, and the nun says that she has no idea. Nora says that those birds are trained to come home, so she must have done something different, and the nun says that maybe they're delivering the message of love, and Nora says it's great that her newlyweds believe that a bird with a range of 50 miles is going to carry their stupid poetry to Timbuktu, but don't sell that bullshit to her. She clearly does not believe in the idea of love, and that's something that just is a concept she doesn't understand. And The woman says she's not trying to sell her anything. There's just a nicer story. And Nora asks who that man was she just saw waving. The nun asks if she's talking about Father Brian, and Nora gets the sense that these two actually had sex, which the nun says didn't happen, but Nora explains to her that this man did, and Nora asks if that's her room, and basically the nun says she didn't, but Nora thinks she did, tells her, swear to God the nun does his ass, and Nora says that she's a liar, and the nun says that he saw her dancing with a man. She said she didn't know. She says she'll pray for the safety of her birds, and Nora tells her not to waste her breath. She rides out, and again, you can tell how protective Nora really is of these birds, the way she kind of takes comfort in using these birds, because she is so alone. These birds really are the only way that she really does take comfort in the world, and I really did like seeing that here. So she then goes to the farm. She rides out. She ends up falling off the bike, but she gets back up despite being in a bit of pain, and she sees the beads on the ground. She sees the goat then chained to a gate. She goes to save it. She falls down the hill, and they then eventually makes her way to the goat, and she sees it wearing the beads, and she unties it, and she puts the beads around her, which I saw this as she's finally allowing those sins that she has committed back into her. She's not abandoning them. You know, she's now lived off the grid to get away from it all, but this is her way of being like, all right, those sins happen, and this is my way of putting them back into me, but trying to move on from it. And he brings the goat back to the farm. She goes to the goat and asks if he's hungry. She goes in the kitchen, goes to get the goat some vegetables. She brings it to him and puts the bowl in front of him and tells him not to eat it, and he says he'll feel better. She looks through the many notes written by the crowd. Some of them contain very revealing secrets, and some are just simple love notes. And she's reading, she hears a car, and we get this incredible scene where Kevin actually returns, and we get the scene that we've been waiting for, where we see him return, who asks if she wants to know how he found her, and finally, he's willing to tell her the truth. And at first, he's very rude about it, because he really didn't want to have to tell her, and he says when Matt told him that she was gone, he didn't believe him, or he couldn't. He just had this feeling that she was still alive, and that he'd see her again. And then Matt died, and she wasn't even at the funeral, and that should have convinced him, but he couldn't believe the last night he was ever going to see her was in that hotel room, the night he burned his book. There's just no way that he was going to make sure that that was the last night. There's no way that was going to happen. You know, there was, destiny didn't say that. So he says he was so sure she was still alive, even though everyone else in the world said otherwise, and he still felt like he had to do something about it. So he decided he was going to look for her and start right where he lost her. And every year he does have 2 weeks of vacation. Every year he comes to Australia, he shows her pictures to everyone he meets, and then they all could look at him and shake their heads and say they're sorry. But he couldn't stop, but he just couldn't stop. And every year he would come back because he couldn't stop. And then a couple days ago, he showed the picture to that nun. He saw it in her eyes that he knew her, and when he saw her, he couldn't believe it. There she was. And then he was but he didn't know what to say or where to start, you know, but it was or where to start. So he thought he'd just erase it all, hoping to give them another chance. But she was right. It's not true, and obviously that doesn't work. By just erasing it all, it just made things more awkward, and that's how he found her. Basically, you know, he refused to believe that she was gone. She asked if he wants some tea, and he asked for what reason, and she says she was going to make him a cup, and asked if he wants some, and he says yes. And finally, now she's gotten the confession out of Kevin, they finally start to move in a place where they are comfortable with each other. And the rest of this episode is Kevin and Nora having this conversation. It's an extremely satisfying scene. We see she brings him the tea, asks if he wants a cigarette. He says no, he quit because of his heart condition, and she asks if that part is true. He says yes, and asks what else is, and he says everything he said about Matt's funeral, and Jill, and Tommy, and his father. And she asks if he moved back to Mapleton. He says no, he's still in Jarden in their house, and she asks if anyone still calls it Miracle. He says not so much, and we get a brief update on the Murphys. Now, I know a lot of people could have said, oh, we could have easily seen the Murphys and seen how they're living, but I feel like Kevin describing it made a lot more sense. Remember, Nora doesn't want any details about the residents of Jarden. She wants Laurie to leave her out of it, and she knows basically as much as we do. So because we are, you know, so intimately close with Nora throughout this episode, I thought it made a lot of sense for them to, you know, not show the Murphys here. So we see Michael's pretty much running the church now. He sees Erica there every once in a while. She's great. And John and Laurie still live next door. And Nora admits to him that she talks to Laurie sometimes just when she needs to. And obviously, Kevin's in shock with this. You know, he asks if she knows she's here. She says to not be mad at her since she's her therapist and wasn't allowed to tell him. And he asks why she didn't tell him. And she says because he was right despite what he said in the hotel the last time they saw each other, that she did need to be with her kids. And he says he didn't mean it that way. She says he meant it, and he was right there. We're always going to be bulletproof vests, huge from holy men tattoos to cover up. But these were just ways to deal with what she lost. She needed a way to get them back. She needed that closure. Even though it might not have been possible, she still was determined to get that closure with them. And she knew there was a chance it would kill her. But she made her peace with that. And she said goodbye to her brother, and she climbed right in, and he says she changed her mind, and she says no. And we finally find out what actually happened to her when she went through. So she says she didn't. She actually did go through, and she was in the parking lot naked, curled up like a baby, and it was the same one she'd just been in, except there was no trucks or people or anything, and it was so cold. She started to walk, and she walked 5 empty houses, abandoned buildings, and she found a store. So she went in, and there were clothes. They were hanging on racks. She got dressed and got back to walking, and she walked long enough to convince herself that she was the only thing alive in that place. And night came, and she saw a light. So she went to it, and it was a house, and there was a man and a woman there, and they were kind, and they told her that 7 years earlier, he was in a supermarket, then every person disappeared except for him, and the woman told her that she lost her husband, her 3 daughters, and all 8 of her grandchildren, and that's when she understood that over there, they lost some of them, but over there, they lost all of them. I mean, while they lost some of their loved ones there, they're cut off from completely the rest of the world, and I was shocked with this, but we actually do find out what the departure world is like. We don't really give her any reason why, but we now know what this world is actually like. She says that she went to do what she came there to do. She went to find her kids, and planes don't really fly there. They have enough resources, but just not enough pilots, so she found a boat that would take her, but none go directly from Australia to New York. So it took her a long time to get there, but she finally did, and she walked through Mableton, the town where she grew up, and her parents and Matt died, and where they met, and most of the houses were overgrown with weeds. I mean, this is a town that just serves so many different memories, and most of the houses at this point were overgrown with weeds, but the streetlights still turned at night, and that made her feel less stupid about expecting them to still be there in this very same house where she lost them. And when she got there, she stood near a tree across the street and waited because she was too scared to go up and knock, and then after a while the door opened, and at first she didn't recognize them at all. She, was a tall teenage boy with curly hair and a girl who was maybe 11. Both were her children, who obviously have significantly aged because of the 7-year gap there, but they were all smiling and they were happy, and she understood that here in this place, they were the lucky ones, and she wanted to keep it that way. She could see how happy they were, and that Doug essentially had replaced her, and she didn't really feel like she needed to be in their lives. Just seeing them happy, that gave her closure. She now knows how they're feeling. She now at least knows, what they're really, feeling there. And I thought this was just a really powerful scene, and I really did love the way that was done. And basically, she says that she understood that here in this place, they were the lucky ones. In a world full of orphans, they still had each other, and she was a ghost who had no place there, and that is when she changed her mind. She says a physicist who sent her through told her the first person to use the machine was the guy who invented it, and his name is Dr. Von Egan, and she's pretty sure that they were making fun of him, but they said when she went over that she should look him up, and she did, and it took a long time, but she actually did find him. And she says she asked him to make another machine because he already knew how, and he asked her if she came all that way, why in God's name would she want to go back, and she told us because she was alone, so he built it, and she came back through to Australia. And basically, she didn't want to feel alone anymore. And despite thinking about him, wanting to call and be with him, so much time had passed. In reality, she really did want to be with Kevin, but so much time had passed since then, she felt it was simply too late. And she knew if she told him what had happened, that he would never believe her. There's no way he would believe her. I mean, she didn't believe about the Patty stuff. Why would he believe her about this? But in a brilliant twist, this is the first time that Kevin is in mutual agreement with her. And he says that he actually does believe her. And she's shocked, and he asks why wouldn't he since she's here. And they join hands, and she smiles, and finally, after so many years, it finally seems like Kevin and Nora are finally able to be in a place of peace, where they're able to finally move on from the rough events they have. And we see at the end, as they have finally found peace, the birds suddenly reappear onto the deck right where they belong, following the love that Kevin and Nora really do have, which perfectly wraps up this masterful show. But let's just get into this finale and how I really did feel about it overall, and what I thought about the season as a whole. So, wow, I mean, what an amazing finale. Like I said, this is a finale that I did not all expect to go the way it did, but with a show like this, I really don't think that they could have had a better ending, honestly. I think anything they would have done, they would have somehow gotten me on board with. But the way they handled this was so peculiar, but also so genius. The fact that this was such a simplistic episode and that this was very basic. There wasn't really anything that crazy to it. I mean, this is one of the most low-key episodes of The Leftovers that we had, and I loved every second of it. And what's great about this one is when you strip away all that magic and you strip away all the mythology stuff, this is essentially a story about Kevin and Nora and them trying to have this relationship, but unfortunately their past endeavors getting in the way and them trying to move past it. And that's what this show was really all about. And that scene with Nora where she's finally confessing to Kevin, you get the sense that now I don't know if they're going to get together. I really don't know. But they are in a place where they are able to move on from what happened to them. Now that they have confessed what they've really gone through, they finally seem to be in a place where they feel relaxed and that they can finally live in this community. And there's this great line, where I believe it was Kevin, he talks about how if the world is great, why can't we just enjoy it? Why can't we just enjoy the world for what it is? And let's stop dwelling on these secondary things that just aren't really part of our lives anymore. They have to get the sense that they're not really part of our lives. And I think it's something that Nora really didn't understand. Yes, they are her kids, but Nora's just not really a part of their story anymore, unfortunately. And it sucks because obviously Nora loves her kids and she wants to be with Aaron and Jeremy, but she just doesn't have that same connection that she did so many years ago, and it really is sad, but I thought it made a lot of sense for them to do that. And again, the way that ending was done, it was so perfect. I don't think they could have handled that any better than it really was. When it comes to the other characters, though, I'm glad that we only got like brief mention of them. We got that brief scene with Laurie, Matt was mentioned, John, Michael were mentioned, Joe was mentioned, Tommy was mentioned. No one was really left out. I definitely, no one was really left out or anything, but it was interesting, and most of this episode did confine to these two characters being in a futuristic world. I was very surprised with the way they did that, but I thought it was incredibly well done. It really did show how far the show has come, and it really did bring the show full circle in many ways, and that's something that I was very, very impressed with how the show really did get it down. But of course, the scenes with Dr. Becker and Dr. Eden were still just as riveting, not really knowing what the outcome was going to be. And now that we do know, it still is very thrilling, but now that we know what really went down, I think it is definitely going to change a little bit of this season, so we'll have to see. I really did love the way that all went down. I think it was an incredibly well-done arc. Really, everything was wrapped up perfectly. Now, yes, there are still some unanswered questions. Like, again, they're never going to explain what happened in the departure. They're never going to explain how certain people were murdered. That's just the nature of this show, and I've come to realize that, and this is one of those shows where I don't care if they reveal everything. I really didn't want them to. I just wanted a really amazing finale, and that's absolutely what I got here, and I have to say this has to be one of the best series finales that I personally have ever seen. It was everything that I wanted to be, and I'm absolutely going to give The Leftovers Season 3, Episode 8, The Book of Nora, a 5 out of 5 or an A+. This is how you do a series finale. Like I said, it was unconventional, it was unpredictable. It took the show in a completely new direction, also really to show what the point of the show really is. Yes, you have all these sci-fi moments, yes, you have these great character moments, but when it really does come down to it, it's about Kevin and Nora trying to live, in this one society and one that doesn't really respect them very much, and kind of seeing them go on their career paths throughout the show. And I think that was incredibly well handled in this scene. I thought just everything about this episode was perfect. It was everything I wanted the finale to be. You finally are starting to see Kevin and Nora move past their depressing like selves, and they're finally starting to find peace, and they're starting to be happy again. And you really are hoping that that does last. And a lot of people are going to question, was Nora really telling the truth? I don't really think it matters. I think it's more that Kevin, just realizing that she did open up to him, finally felt like he was free. He didn't feel like he had to hide anything from her. He didn't really feel like they had any constraints, and that was something I was very impressed with. I really did love the way this really did go down. This could have been a very underwhelming finale, but because of how well they really did build everything up, this really was the most satisfying finale possible. Now, do I even really need to talk about this season? I don't really think it's worth repeating, but because of how much I fucking love this show and how much I think that it is such an important show that nobody is watching and it truly is the best show on TV, I have to continue to indulge in it because this show is just incredible. I mean, everything we got in this final season is exactly what we should have gotten. It found every way to heighten the stakes, but it also found a way to subdue it a little bit. It didn't go full on because this show was never about that. The show was never about the action. It was never a sci-fi show. It gets very badly misjudged for that, when in reality, the show really is just a love story between Kevin and Nora, and there's a lot of, supernatural elements kind of getting in the way of that. And the way they did focus more on that, I thought was a lot, it was definitely very well done. And something else I really do love about this season, I think already, does surpass season 2, is the way they would use the ensemble. Season 2, we had a lot of these very personal episodes. You would see one or two characters, you'd be like, where the hell is this character? This season did a really good job because they only had, 8 episodes of really utilizing the ensemble throughout the episodes, like especially starting with episode 5, they really did utilize the ensemble very well, and I was very impressed with the way that did go down. It really was only the finale that didn't do that tactic, and I was overall really impressed with the way they did handle that. It was very different than what season 2 did, but I think that was the idea. They wanted this to be a very different season, and in many ways it was a very different season, and especially when it comes to answers. I mean, we found it a lot more than I expected us to. I never expected them to reveal things like, oh, is Kevin immortal? What's this future life all about? Who is that man that lit himself on fire? Did the device really work? I mean, I didn't expect them to really reveal a lot of that. And truth be told, we don't know if they really did. I mean, for all we know, they could be deceiving us. And, Damon Lindelof has brought this up before, that it's less about the answers. It's never been about the answers. It's a show that's simply about what happens when there aren't any answers, and that's one of the reasons why I think the show is as genius as it is, because it's less about that and more about these characters really trying to, find ones, and that was a lot of what the season was. It was these characters kind of soul searching for their own answers. What is the reason that Kevin is immortal? Is Nora able to go through this device? Will Laurie finally deal with her suicide? All these past demons getting in the way, and that's something the show just handles so well. I always will love it about the show, and I also love how intimate the show really is. I've talked about it before, but it's such an intimate show where, we only see what a certain character sees, and we know who, the central character is in every scene, and they did that incredibly in this final season. But they also did a really good job with, like I said, putting in the actual main cast. John was in it a lot. Michael had a lot more to do this season, which already was very impressive because I feel like he was very underused in season 2. Grace was a great character. Kevin Garvey Sr., I love seeing him becoming a main character. He was fantastic here. Of course, Nora was great. But I just really did love the way they did use the ensemble. And a lot of people say this, but I will admit, wiping out the GR really did heighten the tension on the show. It showed it wasn't afraid to go in a very ballsy direction, and by getting rid of the GR, it gave us something brand new, a new force. Like, what's going to be our big plot now the GR is gone? They did a really good job setting that up here, and I'm very happy with the way that did play out with them doing that. I think that was definitely something that was extremely well handled. When it comes down to the characters, that's something I will miss the most about the show. Every single one of these characters I fell in love with. I really did. I found every single one of them to be very relatable. Even ones like Jill, who never really had her own standalone episode, you could always see where she was coming from. And every character you could really connect to in a way than other shows, you just can't. It felt less like watching a TV show and more like watching a friend have an outburst and watching a friend go through a crisis. All of these characters felt like family. They really did. They felt like a personal TV family that we have the pleasure of, spying on and kind of just like just kind of sneaking in on, and I thought that was something that the show just handled perfectly. But the other thing I will miss deeply about the show has to be the cinematography. Cinematography throughout this entire show is just amazing. It's so immaculately constructed, and there's just no words. I mean, there's no words when it comes to cinematography here. It's spellbounding. It really is. And it really does speak volumes for how audacious the show has really become, and how weird they weren't afraid to get in this final season. You know, they weren't afraid to do that. They went in some pretty strange directions. I mean, worshiping this like lion that is part of this sex cult, yeah, I think that definitely is pretty weird. The whole thing with the goat is pretty weird, but it never is just weird to be weird. There's always a deeper meaning hidden beneath it, and that's something I love. Every single one of these episodes really do warrant multiple viewings, and I can't wait to rewatch every single one of them to really get the gist of what was the real intent here. What was Damon really trying to approach? And he has yet to reveal, you know, what he was really trying to do in this episode. Like, was Nora really telling the truth? Things like that. I love that he deceives you. I love that he doesn't tell the truth ever, because it's not about his opinion. It's about what we feel about the show. It's about how we feel about these characters, and that's something that I always really did feel. I always really did care about these characters. I always was less into the mystery and more into just them evolving and how they're really going to deal with this, and that's something that was just so well handled throughout the show. I love the way that was done. Also, the choice to make every single one of the intros this season a different intro was really cool. I actually wish they did that throughout the whole show, because it made the show a lot more unpredictable. The way they did correspond with the designated episode was almost seamlessly. Like, it just kind of felt like this was the perfect song every single week. There wasn't one week where he picked a song I'm like, I don't really know why that was in here. I think all of the music this season has been on point, except for God Only Knows last week. I don't really know what that was all about, but other than that, the music choices have been completely on point. I have loved pretty much everything we've gotten out of these musical choices, and again, Lindelof really knows what to do when it comes to music. I mean, just the little piano ballad. I mean, I really am gonna miss the whole da 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 da, that classic melody. I really am gonna miss it. That is a television score that will eventually become a classic. If it's not already, it definitely will now, and I can't wait to see the way that the show does evolve, because I've talked about it before. This is a show that right now, unfortunately, is not very popular. That's the main reason why the show is actually canceled. But I will, in fact, say that I think this is one of those shows where maybe 3 to 4 years, everybody is going to be talking about the show. The show is going to blow up eventually. It's not blown up yet because, again, there's just so many things on TV and no one really watched it and no one knows this show is on. But I think because of how much great stuff there really is on TV nowadays and things like that, I think that really is going to play a role with this show, definitely. I think the show eventually will get that funny. I think the show will eventually get a huge following, and I could see it becoming like a Twin Peaks, honestly, where it gets this huge following. And Leftovers is, you know, again, volumes ahead of Twin Peaks in every way possible, leaps and bounds away, but I still love Twin Peaks, but The Leftovers is just a better show in my opinion. I just love the weirdness of the show, the quirkiness of the show, and how unafraid they were to push the envelope and go in some really weird directions. In lesser shows, you know, you wouldn't really see a lion orgy, you wouldn't really see all this biblical talk, but the show is never afraid to do that. It was everything that Lindelof wanted to be, and that's the reason why the show is so good. No part of this season felt like Lindelof just wrote this in for convenience, or Lindelof just wrote this in to satisfy us. In fact, the finale is anything but that. It is very satisfying because Nora and Kevin now go on with their lives, and they finally seem to be moving away from the, you know, demons that they've had throughout their lives. But where do their lives really go now? We don't really know, but that's not really what's important. It's less about what's, you know, where we're going, and more about how these characters do approach it and how they're able to overcome this grief and finally be able to enjoy life in the way that they really wanted to. And I think, again, that scene with, you know, that scene where we had, what's his name, speaking in the finale, I think really did play a big role there, where we had, Aggie's husband, you know, speaking all about, the whole thing of, you know, how we commit sin and sometimes we commit, you know, just really, bad mistakes, and I really did like that comparison there. I could honestly just go on all day for the show. I really could. I could literally just do a 20-minute video on why The Leftovers is an amazing show, but you guys know how much I really do love this show. You know the time that I really do put into these reviews, and I don't do that for nothing. I do because I love this show. I feel like this show is worth more than a 30-minute review. It's worth a very long review like the one you're seeing right now. This video, I believe, is going to be an hour long, but I absolutely loved everything about the show. I am very sad to see it go, but I really do think this is the best way they could have closed out the show, and I'm absolutely going to give Season 3 of The Leftovers a 5 out of 5 or an A+. what an incredible show this really was, and especially because it started up as just kind of a good show that was very pretentious, and then evolved into the complete opposite, and especially what it is today. It is an incredible show. I can't believe that it's ending when it is. I am definitely not ready to say goodbye to it, but I really am hoping that this is a show that does eventually pick up more traffic, once it gets onto Netflix and things like that. I've loved everything about the show, and I really do think in terms of final seasons, this is really the best they could have done in terms of that. So overall, guys, that's it. Sadly, The Leftovers is over. I can't believe it either. I am really gonna miss this show. Just what an incredible show this has been. I want to thank you guys for sticking with me throughout all of these episodes. There's only been 28 of them, which is insane, but I want to thank you guys for sticking with me through every one of them. I know these reviews get very long, but what can I say? I'm passionate about the show. I really do love everything about the show, and I want to just go full out. So I apologize for that, guys, but I wanted to give you the best review possible and the most concise one, so that's why they were so long. But either ways, guys, Leftovers is over. I can't believe it. Let me know what you guys thought of this finale overall. Love your thoughts on it, and we'll see you guys in my next video, which will be for Twin Peaks: The Return, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.